When you're 72, what do? Go into a retirement home or go bowling? Me, I decided I'd go motor racing. You need three things to go motor racing. First of all, you need a CAMS licence. You need to be a member of a club. I joined the Historic Sports and Car Racing Association. And then of course, thirdly, you need a car. But actually my story doesn't begin quite there. It really all began at this Longford revival. Longford was a track in Tasmania. In the 60s, it was probably the best track in Australia. It was 4.5 miles around, 1.5 miles straight, very fast track. All the famous drivers in the world like Graham Hill, Jimmy Clark. Back in those days, in '64, I was racing an Elfin. That's what I raced at Longford. Prior to that, I had a Lotus Elite, which I first got in England. I was working at a television station down in Hobart, and I met Brian Higgins, who was then touring car champion of Tasmania.
Blame my wife Pam, and she commented to me one day that this chap had arrived with a Lotus Elite, and being interested in cars, I'd just like to know, the motivation of people that drive them. Well, Longford in the 60s was literally in Australasia the holy grail of racing. The equivalent of the Formula One teams from the Northern Hemisphere used to come down here for what was known as the Tasman Series. Cars came from all over Australia and New Zealand and overseas indeed as well to race at Longford, which was just a marvellous 4.5 mile road circuit, bridges crossing rivers, hawthorn-lined straights with open corners, just a superb place. I mean, in those days you could go to a driver's briefing and find yourself standing next to one of the Formula One drivers visiting from the Northern Hemisphere. Everybody was friendly, everybody was approachable. It was just a marvellous period to be involved in motor racing. And they decided to have a revival. A few people got together and said, this is just too good to let go. We should have a revival while the people that were actually there are still alive, because none of us are getting any younger. So a reunion was arranged, and we had a great weekend and much reminiscing, and I think that's when he got bitten by the bug to then go historic racing, and I'm sure it's a decision he'll never regret.
Trying to find a car was the problem. You have to find something that is historic. It's got to be at least younger than 1980. So we started searching around the country. We looked at a copy of a Lotus 23B up in Queensland. We then looked at an open wheeler that had a Ford V8 in the back of it. Finally, in Victoria, we found this little beast, the TVR, down in Geelong in Victoria, and we went down and flew down and had a look at it. Our first trip out with the little car was at Wakefield Park near Goulburn, south of Sydney. Our next one was Eastern Creek. Now, once again, we set out from home to drive down there, and it poured with rain the whole way down, teemed with rain. Was still pouring at the driver's briefing, and there was like a river going across the straight about halfway down. I just enjoyed every minute of it. It was just a beautiful track to drive on. I think everyone in Australia knows Phillip Island. It's perched right on the edge of the ocean. It's arguably the best motor racing circuit in Australia, and the annual Festival of Motorsport is the largest historic festival in the Southern Hemisphere, comparing favourably with similar events like Goodwood and Monterey. The feature race of the meeting was an invitational event for Bathurst-type Group A and C touring cars, and these included many famous vehicles such as the M3 Beamers, the Nissan GTRs, the Ford Sierras, the XJS Jags, plus Tiranas, Commodores, Falcons, and of course Brock Holdens. regularity. This is an event that firstly requires the least in race preparation, in that the cars can run pretty much as they were produced in their era and with the simplest form of CAM's racing licence. It's a perfect entree for older drivers to re-enter the sport without the added pressure to be first across the line to win. After practice and qualifying, each driver nominates a lap time, and the one who consistently laps closest to this nominated time wins. Having said that, most can't resist a spot of racing if they get into a dice with another competitor. If there is a downside, it's that anything from the stipulated era can enter regardless of horsepower, and this means there is a huge differential between the slow and faster cars. If you are out there in your little low-capacity sports car, you have to figure that the Shelby Mustang or some other muscle car is probably going to lap you.
Okay, another 15 minutes of regularity. This is Division 2 category. Second time. Yeah, it's loading for Brunswick and then still over that way. Still out there.
Out of the 544 drivers present at Phillip Island this year, 112 competed in the two divisions of regularity, 56 in each class, which are pretty big fields. Along with the Formula 5000s, regularity uses a rolling start to avoid any first lap carnage. It takes about 2/3 of a lap to get the whole field out onto the track and lined up behind the pace car. But finally, the green flag signals we are off and racing.
When the clock stops and
Once a class is finished, they exit at turn 4 to return to the pits, and once the tail enders are clear, the next class is out on the track. The organisers have to run a tight ship to finish each day by curfew at 5 o'clock. Yeah, it went much better today, the car. I was very happy with it. Knocked off about 13 seconds on the practice times. Mind you, the practice times were only there to learn the track, whereas qualifying I had to try a bit harder.
Dave and I were chatting today with John Bower, that an icon of Australian motorsport, won everything, driven everything, very varied career. He went to Longford as a schoolboy and still, talks about it to this day because that was the impact it had on people. So the younger people now are appreciating, you see them driving the older cars and appreciating for what they were. They were quite primitive compared to what you see today, but they were drivers' cars. There were no electronic aids, there was no nothing, and there was no backup like there is today from the pits with two-way radios or anything like that. You were out there driving the car on the conditions on the day as best you could. Historics is really such groundswell, ground floor racing for racing's sake. There's no monetary gain, there's nothing other than the sheer pleasure that motor racing can give you. The Formula One Ferrari of its era that won the World Championship in 1952 and 3, driven by Alberto Ascari, and was indeed the first World Championship that Ferrari ever won. To see that sitting in the pits in Australia in immaculate, pristine condition, it'd make a statue weep. Just so nice.
A true one-of-a-kind is this Elfin GTS Streamliner Coupe, owned by Wayne Sayers of Victoria, with a long racing history. Here it is as it was nearly 50 years ago, and it makes me wonder whatever happened to my old Elfin. We actually thought we saw it arrive at the island.
But it was a sister car. There were two identical cars built, the one that David had and the one that we saw at Phillip Island, and it is identical in every way. And they were bought as rolling chassis and bodies by the one man, and he fitted them out with the climax motors and the four-wheel discs and the independent rear suspension, and they're the only two that are about. And to see that one in such immaculate condition going around it brought back a lot of great memories, and will renew my efforts to try to find out where David's car currently is.
Well, that's a brief glimpse of our weekend at Phillip Island. And now we only have the long drive home and, of course, our memories. Best summed up by Brian when he said,
This has got to be the closest thing to heaven there is.